if you really think about why do I use those apps, what you'll probably find is that they're just convenient. So they offer you value in the terms of it's quicker, it's faster, it's easier. And that same convenience is very valuable to fraudsters as well. They see, oh, okay, so many ways, so many scams, so many different things, but actually, the active fraud is consistent. And the definition is intentional deception for personal gain. And a fraudster is really trying to create some deceit and then profit from that in some way. So we can see interesting information around instances of fraud occurring in particular markets, and we can see that there are some challenges that as the region is digitizing, fraud generally follows it in a wave after. Before you do anything in the digital channel, you need to establish trust, and that the person or whoever you're interacting with, you trust that they are actually who they say they are, because without that, then you open yourself up to fraud. So once they're kind of into your services, they can then do whatever they need to do. So the two things become very intertwined. Identity is really important as the precursor to everything.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. Today, my guest is John Cannon. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Creditinfo Group, a business that has been known globally for providing credit bureau services, but are much, much more in terms of providing data and related services, specifically within the financial services space mostly, but also dealing with a few other sectors. And really, John brings a broad view of Creditinfo's mission and its commercial edge across the many continents where they operate. Thank you for joining us, John.
Thank you.
So, John, I really would like to get your backstory, a little bit of history, a bit of flavor around who you are, your background, how did you get into this space, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you want to go right back, at heart, I always wanted to be a technologist. So I wanted to do computer science, and that was my career, that I was going to go and be a developer, and I was going to go and code. But if you can think back that far, before the internet really existed, so when I was going to college,
you and I are in the same sort of age group.
so when I was going to college, they would only run a particular course if more than 4 people signed up for it, and I was the only person in college who signed up for computer science, so they didn't run the course. So I ended up doing chemistry as a degree, and then decided I didn't want to be a chemist, and then I applied for a bunch of jobs, and I got a job with a credit bureau, and that was the start of the journey. And 30 years later, here I am working in a credit bureau again.
So you could almost say you almost fell into it. It sort of happened to you.
Yeah, I think it was my time at university just told me that I didn't really want to do chemistry. I didn't want to work in a lab, so I wanted to do something else. And so then when it was around about the time when sort of the internet and data and the power of that was really sort of coming to fore, that's what attracted me into it.
And there's that convergence with an interest with the internet and also now this credit space. Again, it's still quite a unique, career option, I would imagine, in the sense that on the face of it, it's something that many people might not see as being obvious. But was there something that really appealed to you about the credit space even at that point?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, when I started off in business information, so creating reports on companies. And so that was something that was really starting to take off at the time, because as trade's happening, being able to understand the financial stability of another business, a partner or whatever. And whilst on that journey, if I go back as far as 2003, I think it was, the kind of money laundering regulations were first coming into the sort of Europe, the money laundering directive, and actually that was something that really interested me. So I kind of got involved in actually as they were sort of interpreting the regulations into the UK market, and then from there sort of looked at how we could build identity services. So I actually built first identity service I was involved in probably back around about 2005. So. And that's one of the reasons we're here in Kenya this week, is to promote our new identity services into this market as well.
Okay, we'll come back to a bit more detail on that, but I'd also like to understand a little bit more about your background. I know you worked at really significant organizations in this space like TransUnion, which we know of,
Yep.
Equifax, and of course now Creditinfo. And what have you learned in this time around scaling credit intelligence across markets?
Yeah. So probably the one I point to is so I joined a business in the UK called Credits, which is the business that TransUnion acquired. And so part of the journey there was to look to find new innovative products and bring to market. So we kind of created a proposition from scratch and scaled it to kind of 70 million recurring revenue, which then formed a big part. It grew to about 30%, 35% of the business overall, and was a big part of the reason why TransUnion came in and bought the business. So that journey was quite, the growth happened fast, and that can be a great thing, but it can also create some challenges, some problems when it comes to scaling. So the experience of that has been really useful in later career to actually go back. Every time we start a new proposition, some of the things we learned during that period are really important for this journey we're on today.
So you've been in this space for a long time. Creditinfo has various strategies that you're adapting across Africa, Europe, the Caribbean. Within that, of course, identity and fraud is kind of your areas of focus. How do you manage to do that? How do you take this strategy and sort of scale it at a global level?
So I guess we're very lucky and very fortunate at Creditinfo. We operate in about 50 countries globally. So, and when you kind of look at all of those countries and spread across like Europe, across Africa, across Middle East, Asia, they all have very different requirements, customer needs, on different journeys from digital, like where they are in digitization. So we actually have within our business a lot of great innovation that have happened all around the world, and so really, that gives us a really strong footing to be able to take some of that innovation and deploy it into different regions. So it's not kind of like we have to sort of focus on a particular area and just think of, right, what's the next thing new innovation and invent something brand new. There's a lot of opportunity for us just to simply take the learnings from one market and then take it to another market that's sort of still on that journey and be able to then bring that expertise and that knowledge to that business to help to scale then and move forward and put the focus onto that.
And of course, I imagine part of that process involves a lot of localization, customization, depending on how those markets work, right?
Yeah, so there's always going to be an element of, with what we do, because of certain nuances in the market, whether it's how we work with a central bank or the regulators, or how commerce is done in that region. But there's also a lot of things that translate very well at a global level. So from my perspective, at a group level, I'm really keen to reuse capability and things we build where we can create this and then deploy it into multiple regions in one go, as opposed to a scenario where we might build something for this region over here and then we build the same thing separately over here. It's not very efficient to do it in that way. So there are always going to be things that are regional, but with a global kind of platform where we deploy the things.
So that's brilliant. So what that means is that at inception, you already are sort of thinking about how does this translate into other use cases for other markets, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, we today we operate, and again, over the last year since I joined, we've moved towards sort of having 5 kind of vertical pillars of our business, which we group all of our products and solutions into. So they are credit solutions, our business information solutions, we have our software decisioning analytics solutions, and then we have a consumer offering, direct to consumers, and more recently we've added now fraud and ID as a pillar as well. And so we build capability, and from a group perspective, I don't mind whether a region takes the lead on it or whether we build it at a group level, or quite often it's a hybrid, a combination of both, as long as it's done in such a way that it can be reused in other regions. So there would have been a time in the past where a region in the business may have built something and we're only really thinking about how we sell that into that region. Today, we operate in a way so that we always think about, can this be used elsewhere? And so how do we need to architect this to make sure that we can take it and put it into another region at a later date? Because then we get the efficiencies of being able to do that, and then the market benefits as well.
Excellent. So I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about data, identity, and trust. And I think that's really a key part of your focus at Creditinfo. How are identity verification and fraud prevention intertwined in today's credit ecosystem?
Yeah, so look, I mean, fraud is, the act of fraud. I mean, there's so many different use cases, so many ways, so many scams, so many different things. But actually, the act of fraud is consistent, and the definition is intentional deception for personal gain, and a fraudster is really trying to create some deceit and then profit from that in some way. That usually means cash, money, or something of value they can convert into cash. So what you've seen in recent years is we've had this kind of all around the world, we've had this sort of adoption of digital services and this shift to digital. And so the reason for that is, if you think of why like digital is so valuable to us as consumers, you only have to think about like the top 5 apps you use on your phone. And if you really think about why do I use those apps, what you'll probably find is that they're just convenient. So they offer you value in the terms of it's quicker, it's faster, it's easier. And that same convenience is very valuable to fraudsters as well. They see, oh, okay, 20 years ago, if I wanted to commit fraud, I might have to walk into a bank and pretend to be someone else. And only a certain type of person would feel confident enough to go and try and do that. Whereas today in the digital channel, well, I don't have to do that. I can sit in a room at home behind a keyboard. I'm disassociating myself with it. So the very nature of that opens fraud up as it's attractive to a wider audience. So with the digital channel, so the point about sort of the link between fraud and identity, before you do anything in the digital channel, you need to establish trust and that the person or whoever you're interacting with, you trust that they are actually who they say they are. Because without that, then you open yourself up to fraud. So once they're kind of into your services, they can then do whatever they need to do. So the two things become very intertwined. Identity is really important as the precursor to everything. And if you don't get that right, then you'll suffer from fraud around identity theft, etc.
Wow. And then what about the role of mobile networks and fintechs, especially in serving the underserved or the unbanked? And then in the context of what Creditinfo does? Because of course, when you look at the dynamics of markets like Kenya, mobile is incredibly important as a touch point. It's where a lot of our interactions and of course mobile money vis-a-vis, Safaricom's M-Pesa is dominant. What are you seeing there, and how does Creditinfo play into that space?
Yeah, it's really important, and you touched on the point there that if you were to sort of in some of the regions we operate in, Kenya would be one such one. In fact, most places, far more people own a mobile phone than will have a bank account, for example. Exactly. So when you're trying to provide financial services and educate people on finance and the like to sort of drive an economy, then mobile and alternative like fintech offer a really sort of good channel to get to consumers. So yeah, we recognise that. And you mentioned M-Pesa and the way that sort of it is used regularly. I mean, I encountered this myself while I think it's my 5th visit to Kenya in the last 8 months, and I don't carry cash very often, and I travel around the world a lot. I tend to rely on sort of using cards or using my phone. And the thing I find here in Kenya is that, like in the UK, if you have a meal and then you want to put a tip on the bill, they can kind of take that payment on the card and sort of take that tip. It doesn't happen so much here. And if I've not got cash, I always feel really guilty about, I'm sorry, I haven't got any cash. They say, oh, well, here's my M-Pesa number, just send me. I can't actually get an M-Pesa because I'm not a Kenyan citizen. So that's another thing, which I think
you can actually. I actually think you can.
It's something they're just bringing in. So I actually met with Satoya, CEO of M-Pesa, and I raised this with him. He said it's something they are going to bring in for non-residents to be able to do that.
Non-residents can't have it.
So because I'm not a citizen of Kenya, I can't use M-Pesa today, but that's something they're going to look to do. So then I'll have no excuses for not tipping anymore.
Because I feel like, when you think about how the financial services, let me call it specifically digital financial services, the ecosystem works within this market. Because we all know that in Kenya, cash is still bigger, much bigger than digital. It just seems to be the operating system, so to speak, because any kind of restaurant, any kind of service you need in this country, you will find that M-Pesa will be one of the ways you can pay.
Yeah.
You know, and that I
Yeah.
think is quite unique in one sense, but sometimes a bit of a hindrance for people who might not be domiciled here.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, if you look at kind of currency and cash, it's a transfer of value
Yeah.
from one person to another. Using cash, if you use like Kenyan shilling or US dollar or British pounds, whatever. If I sort of give you a $10 bill, then you'll accept that that is worth $10, and you can exchange it for goods to the value of $10 because it's accepted, and everybody globally accepts that it's got that transfer of value. And so digitally, it's really sort of it's providing the confidence and trust to be able to make that same level of transfer of value just without the cash in your hand. But what it does is it opens up so much more. So, the mobile apps and the engagement from consumers into that sort of space mean that you can start to deliver other services alongside it. And things like, you've seen across the European markets, things like buy now, pay later have been, so wrapping in credit services alongside sort of payments have become quite seamless now.
So coming back to maybe Creditinfo as an organization, thinking about innovation, vision, growth, what are the things that you think separate you from others operating in some of the areas where you operate as a group?
Yeah. So we have a fairly unique sort of advantage in terms of the regions we operate in. So here in Africa, we operate in 25 countries in Africa, and that gives us real insight and understanding of the market. And not just sort of operating, but we have presence in the market as well. So we have people on the ground who are kind of talking to our customers, understanding those needs. So we get much sort of a deeper understanding and ability to build relationships personally with our customers, which I think is really important from what I've seen here in my time in the various Africa regions. That's held really highly. So rather than us being kind of like a global corporation that are not sort of here in presence and sort of selling sort of digitally or whatever, then having that gives us a real advantage. But again, the breadth of our geographic coverage, we see things that are becoming very sought after in other regions that will eventually see transfer into other regions. So the example I would use would be, ESG has been kind of like a topic that's come up quite a lot in some of our sort of European regions. As a result, we built a capability in our Iceland business, and at the moment we are investing to transfer that into some of our other European markets because there's demand for it. And in the conversations we've had here in Kenya, every bank we've talked to, ESG is something that they're kind of looking at and thinking about. But not quite at the point where they maybe want to sort of start taking this on right now, but from next year, there's going to be some guidance. And so it gives us that advantage that we've built something somewhere else. We can now just bring it and start to embed it into another market.
And of course, by then you have the learnings, the best practices, and you can almost lead the way in terms of how this should be done, right?
Yeah, and also we invest in people. So bringing in people who really understand the topic and really immerse themselves and become kind of like real experts who will then speak at events and really kind of understand what's going on. We can then bring those people into these markets to help to guide people as to, look, this is what it means, and this is how you can kind of adapt to kind of take advantage of the value it'll deliver to you.
And even like where we are right now, which is your office in Nairobi, I mean, you've got a substantial setup here, you've got a good number of people. So I think probably the fact that you have this local team that can kind of bring the insights, bring the perspectives, so that as you're rolling out product, presumably they're able to sort of guide that process, ensuring that it meets the needs of the local customer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the local team that will build the relationships with our customers, and then at a group level we have people who have expertise on particular, whether it's a market or a product, who will then support. So, while we're here this week to launch our new fraud and ID proposition, so Rob, who I think you're going to meet shortly, is with us today. So he's in market. Equally, when we're sort of promoting some things around software or business information, the relevant experts will come in and work alongside the local team in order to make sure we've got that complete coverage, the market understanding, the understanding of the customer and the relationship, plus the expertise around the products and solutions working alongside.
Fantastic. So maybe we can talk a little bit about this identity and fraud product that you're launching today.
Yep.
What is it? How does it work? Why Kenya first?
Yeah, so I guess, Creditinfo globally are probably most known first and foremost as being a credit bureau. That's what most of our markets people will know us as. So when I joined the business, it's nearly a year ago now, we had a kind of vision in terms of there are some parts or some things, some areas that we have an opportunity to sort of innovate in, and fraud and identity was one of those. So again, with my background, I've kind of seen how the difference that these types of solutions can make and how they can kind of be adopted and drive real value. So we kind of carried out a whole bunch of research across all of our regions that we operate in to understand where were the areas that we should sort of focus in terms of. So what we're actually building is actually going to be rolled out across all of our regions. We are launching here in Kenya because what the first region that we have included the eKYC elements is here in Kenya today, but then closely follow will be our other East Africa regions and then out beyond there. And I think some of that is to do with we're in a fortunate position. We can run insights or analytics to drive insights on our own data. So we can see interesting information around instances of fraud occurring in particular markets. And we can see that there are some challenges that as the region is digitizing, fraud generally follows it in a wave after, from what I was talking about earlier. So we can kind of see on our data things like, when an identity is in a single day, many times appearing across our customers, applying for things which doesn't look right. Seeing somebody applying for a loan 2 or 3 times in a day may not be unusual, but seeing that 100 times in a day, something not right. So we've got a lot of insight from our own data. We can also see things like, when loans go into default with a payment never being made. Well, why would that? It could be a credit reason, but very often it's either first-party fraud, so the individual never intended to pay back, or it's identity theft. So somebody else used their identity to apply for it, and then the person doesn't know anything about it until the bank kind of asks them for payment. So we can see that information, and that helps to drive sort of some of the insight around where we think the products will sort of deliver the most value from day one.
Fantastic. And in terms of, when you look at this product and what it brings to the market, is it exceptionally different to what we've had all along? Does it sort of essentially change the game, as it were, around identity and fraud?
Yeah, so I believe it does, and the reason for that is there's capability that's out there, and you find this in all global markets. And the way identity is addressed digitally varies across different regions for a whole host of different reasons. But here in this market, there is capability today, and there's things like national ID number checks, there's tax checks, etc. But our approach is really to layer a whole bunch of capability in a single API call. So for the first time, we're bringing all of this stuff together, combining it with the insights we have on the bureau data, and using best-of-breed third-party technology to deliver signals and risk signals into one place. So, from a customer perspective, it kind of means that at whichever point during an engagement with a consumer, if you need to get trust and establish whether the identity is real, person owns the identity, if there's anything fraudulent around this, it can be a simple single call, sub-second, and you get all of this information back to drive then what you do next. So in that respect, there's the uniqueness. Individual elements of it, some of those exist today and they will be being used, but bringing it all together in this layered approach is something that's fairly unique in the market.
So there's something you just said. I don't know whether the audience or anyone technical would probably appreciate this. The fact that it's a single API interface allowing you to access a host of various identity and fraud technologies with the third parties that allow then this single connection can do a multitude of things. Is that also, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is. And I think what's even better from our perspective is that the platform that we have built and enabled this capability in is quite often it's already deployed in a lot of our customers. So
Okay.
it also runs our sort of software decisioning capability. It's a platform called IDM, and it can be used for a full-blown credit decisioning service with scoring, etc., orchestration. But equally, it can just act as a single API call. So it can just be a connectivity. So quite often, what we'll find with this new product is that our existing customers can simply make use of the fraud and ID capability in the way I just described through the existing service that they take from us. So, and they can switch things on and switch things off. So if they want to take everything, they can, or if they just want to take this one element or this combination of 3 or 4, they'll have the flexibility to do that and configure it.
So very modular, very flexible
Yep.
for the customer.
Yep.
How do you ensure your go-to-market strategy remains somewhat agile and efficient as you go to the market?
Yeah, so we, I mean, the way we operate today, we have, our sales teams and our go-to-market teams generally sort of regional based for the reasons I explained earlier. They build the relationship with the customer. They immerse themselves to understand the customer's business and how that operates. And then the flexible element is that we overlay our expertise. So we have people in the business from a pre-sales perspective and from a product and from an analytics perspective who will work alongside sales. So that knowledge that they've gained, so we talked about ESG earlier, or it could be fraud or whatever, is transferable across the regions, and they'll work alongside the sales team to actually bring the expertise alongside the relationship as well.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about Africa, right? You're coming to Kenya right now. This is the first stop for this new proposition. I know
Yep.
there's a longer plan in terms of other products you're going to be releasing across the markets. But what is it that excites you the most about Creditinfo's presence in Kenya and the broader, East African and Sub-Saharan Africa region?
Yeah, so we, I mean, as I said before, we operate in 25 regions across Africa, and we see the real opportunity with Africa and Africa becoming more and more digital and driving a lot of innovation. And as the economy is growing and we're seeing that growth, then it really excites us, which is why we're spending a lot of time here. I think I mentioned before, it's my 5th visit to Kenya. Earlier this year I was in Uganda, Tanzania. So we are putting a lot of focus. We're investing quite heavily here as well in terms of new innovation and products. And it's something that we think, there's also the element of like financial inclusion in the region as well, because there's still huge swathes of the population that don't sort of have access to finance and the like. So, but the digitization of the region is starting to really sort of tap into that, combined with the the prevalence of sort of mobile technology and mobile apps we talked about earlier, just makes it a really attractive region for us.
So obviously, I'm sure there are tales you'll tell or could tell about some of the challenges coming out to Africa, doing what you guys do. Is any of that you'd like to share with us? Some of the things maybe also, again, in the context of some of these new products that you're bringing to market that maybe would make things a little bit easier in the marketplace, especially from a customer perspective?
Yeah. So look, I think this week is about our fraud and ID proposition, but then very close after this, we're launching some more innovation is coming. So next month, we're launching some further, and then again after that, the one that I'd probably mention is today we have a direct consumer business, so we call it My Creditinfo. So when a consumer wants to access their own credit report, they can come to us and they can either come into the office here and get access to it, or they can go online and get that. But we're not really a direct-to-consumer business ourselves, and it's quite a different business model. So we are going to be partnering with banks, financial institutions in the regions to embed credit score and credit reports into online banking apps so that people get more easy access to it. And that'll drive financial education so they understand. So that's a big area at the moment and something that we're seeing a lot of interest in from our customers.
Okay, so when you take sort of the 10,000 feet view of what's happening across Africa, do you see any specific untapped opportunities that Creditinfo might be pursuing going forward?
Yeah, I mean, so today, a big chunk of our business is, I mentioned earlier, business information is a big part of our business globally. But today, up until now, we don't really operate business information data in any of our Africa regions.
Okay.
So we only provide consumer data primarily, but we sit on top of a whole host of rich data about businesses as well. So that's an area that we definitely are focusing on.
Great. And maybe is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we come to the end of our conversation?
No, I mean, in terms of our Africa regions, I just from a personal perspective, sort of spending quite a bit of time out here and in the different regions that I visit, just the overwhelming sort of friendliness of people across our business, Creditinfo, has just been like really inspiring to see and welcoming, and the kind of like I'd sort of call it like leaning in. So, the desire to learn more and to learn about the products and services and really getting excited about what this means and taking to market is something that I haven't seen in other markets that we operate in. I think, certainly, my background in the UK, you just wouldn't get that same level of enthusiasm and the like. And that's something that's really unique and special. And I just hope, that's never lost from the Africa regions, because it really does set you apart.
Fantastic. I'm glad that you have that positive feedback for Kenya and Africa and the markets that you serve here. John, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate everything that you've shared. We're super excited. I'm going to be attending the launch later today to see the new product. And we're really looking forward also to the other roadmap in terms of the other propositions that you're bringing to the marketplace. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So there you've heard it from John Cannon, coming from Creditinfo Global. He shared with us a lot of insights around their business from a global perspective, but also zooming into what's happening within Kenya and the broader African region. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to catching you in the next one.